Why should you be the next mayor of Colorado Springs?
Well, I lived in this community for over 50 years, and I believe that Colorado Springs has a special anointing, and I have spent my life serving. And when I think about Colorado Springs, I'm thinking about the challenges that we have ahead of us. And I truly have been blessed. My wife talked about how great Colorado Springs is. And right now, when you're looking at what's happening globally, what's happening with the state, and some of the issues that we have to face with regard to the economy, our reliance on funding from like the federal and state government, when you're looking about our crime problem, I think it's important to step up and lead, and I'm prepared to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of your ideas when it comes to public safety.
Yes.
Because one of the things that you've brought up is restructuring the budget to focus on public safety. Explain to me what that would look like.
My number one priority is to make Colorado Springs the safest city in the nation. I think that that's the foundation of our community. I've spent over 6 months talking to people, and people are scared. I mean, I remember as a kid, I used to be able to get on a bus, you know, at my house and go to Citadel Mall. My mom never even had to worry about me. There are places in this community that are now not safe. And when you're thinking about our homicide rates, violent crimes, property crimes, the crime is getting out of control and we need to do something about it. So I have a 3-step proactive policing philosophy. Number one, I want to make sure people understand that we're going to start arresting people. If you do harm to our city, to our citizens, we're going to make sure that you are arrested, because I think it's important to send a clear message that we're serious about holding people accountable. But I also think it's important to be able to make sure that people understand that when we're looking at the law enforcement community, there needs to be a relationship there. So I really want to be out there working to make sure that people are aware of our police tactics and training, but also want to bring them closer to the community, because for me, I would love it if more people would want to actually serve in public safety, because when you look like the community that you're representing, I think you have a stronger relationship. So I'm going to be out there personally recruiting and encouraging people to be a part of that. But I also think it's important to look at the legislation that's been passed. I want to build a coalition to make sure that we go in there and look at the laws that are actually hindering our public safety first responders. When you start looking at qualified immunity, when you start looking at basically decriminalizing things and creating incentives for people to actually break the law, that's something that needs to change. So I'm going to be very active in making sure that people are held accountable for that. So the budget, in my opinion, is going to be structured around that, because we need to be more lean and efficient. I'm going to look at every single program and make sure that it's pointed in that direction of how do we make Colorado Springs the safest city in the nation. And I'm going to be looking at eliminating non-essential services and allowing the private sector to actually step up in those particular areas. I want to make us more, more efficient, more lean, and less reliant on federal and state dollars.
Yeah, what are some of those non-essential services?
Well, I'm going to look at everything. I mean, when you start looking at, because if we're performing a mission and you're looking at, is that better suited to be in the private sector because we're essentially competing with them? Because when you're looking at our general fund, we only have about $420 million, and 60% of that is made up for public safety. So there are functions that we are actually performing right now that can be best left for the private sector, and then what we want to do is take those funds and people and reallocate those dollars more towards core services. Our infrastructure is declining. I want to be able to make sure when you're looking at our community, there isn't this huge difference between the southeast corridor and when you're driving north. So that's why I am going to look at every single program through that lens, because if it can be done more efficiently in the private sector, that is going to be a program that I'm going to look at reducing or even eliminating and reallocating those dollars into core services.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the private sector, but specifically when it comes to our homeless community and housing solutions. One of the things you've mentioned is having private sector, faith-based organizations and the nonprofit community being encouraged to financially invest. What does that encouragement look like? I mean, is it grant programs? Is it tax subsidy? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, first thing, you know, the city's face, you got to look at it from the standpoint, what's the city's role in this? And the city's role is kind of, and my wife and I talk about a strategy on how to address this problem. We've actually been working with an individual for a couple of years, and we've helped him transition from homelessness to a place where he actually has a home and a family that he can count on top of us. But the city has a, you know, when we start talking about triaging, you're looking at an immediate response with regard to, you know, in the homeless community, there's a lot of violence in these homeless camps. There are laws on the books that needs to be enforced. So we need to make sure that we have an intake when it comes to what do we do with the initial response. There could be a medical response, there could be a public safety response. We want to be able to deal with that first, but we need community partners. What the city should be doing is working with our community partners, faith-based organizations, and other entities that are out there, and have a pre-existing relationship with them, because we want them to be a part of the solution. Because homelessness is a community initiative, not just a law enforcement response. So what we want to do is challenge faith-based organizations and other organizations to look within their ranks and see what they can do to provide housing assistance. Whether it's providing that gap, because there are people out there that can pay a weekly rate, but they can't put the deposit. Work within your community to be able to help provide that gap assistance. You might be able to have people that can have private property and they can house somebody on a temporary basis or on a long-term basis. We want to be able to know who those are so that we can provide that handoff. But you also have people that have mental health issues, and quite frankly, they're probably going to be arrested. But what we can do is give them a deferred sentence, provided they stay in treatment, because there has to be an accountability piece to be able to make sure people are seeking treatment. So the city's focal point is to be that, almost like that point guard, and have those contacts in place instead of handing somebody a piece of paper and be like, yeah, here's some resources that you can have. We should already have those existing relationships in place so that we can help triage and provide people with real outcomes. I'm not talking about providing financial assistance. We're going to rely on our community partners to step up and fill that gap.
Yeah, and do you feel the city does not have those relationships already existing with some of these organizations?
The problem that you have right now is, and I can tell you from personal experience, what we experienced trying to help this individual is, you know, they're doing the best that they can, but when you have somebody that has been living on the street and you say, here's a piece of paper with the different places that you can potentially look to live, that's not helpful. You actually need to be able to help them with regard to already knowing and having that relationship. Here's where you need to go. You can go to this place for financial assistance for a gap. You can go to this place because they have 3 rooms available. These are your mental health providers. There needs to be more activity there, and that's where I'm saying where it's a partnership, but the city's focal point is to making sure you have that smooth transition in there, but there has to be an accountability piece. We have to enforce the rules on the books, but there has to be a way to make sure that we deal with this problem, because it's growing.
Yeah. Talk to me about what flexible zoning looks like to you.
I want to maximize private property rights, and I think that that's important. When you're looking at a community, especially our city is over 200 square miles, and I can tell you, especially if you work downtown and by the time you get home, the last thing that you want to do is, like, if you want to go to a grocery store or if you want to be able to go to a place to eat, you kind of want that within that community there. You also want to be able to have accessory dwelling units within your area. I think that those are important. So when I'm talking about flexible zoning, I'm talking about thinking outside the box. I'm not saying override covenants, because covenant communities, you know, you move into a community because of the covenants. But I want there to be more flexibility with regard to mixed use, with regard to residential, being able to have accessory dwelling units close to areas where you can shop. Again, these are areas where the government's role should be to maximize private property rights and allow people to be able to use their property as they see fit.
Yeah. We are in the final few seconds here, so I'm just going to give you an opportunity to wrap this up and tell our viewers what you would like to tell them.
Well, again, I grew up here. I've been here for over 50 years. This is my home. I believe that Colorado Springs has a special anointing. But I believe that it's important for us to not ignore some of the problems that are happening at the national level and at the global level, and realize how important it is for us to stand up for our home rule authority. When you're looking at our supply chain issues, I want to make sure that we're in a position to where we can weather this economic storm. That's why I believe that we need to become more lean and efficient, and we can do that without raising taxes. But I think that we have an obligation, especially as a leader, to be honest with people and be able to say, this is what we want to do. I, again, want to make sure that Colorado Springs is the safest city in the nation, and I hope that you believe that. So I need you to believe that we can do this. Believe that we can change things, because I believe that Colorado Springs, when we are focused in with that as our mission, we can be the safest city in the nation.